that.
Okay.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to
Hi.
another session of Own Your Yes. I am your host, Valerie Wilson, and I am so excited for another conversation where we get to really dig into really the insights and learnings of phenomenal, resilient women that really are sharing their stories of success and the challenges on the way there. This is the conversation, the sit down session with real authentic women sharing real truths and really about how we can all thrive as women. So I'm excited to bring to us today Millicent Tracey. I'm so excited. Thank you, Millicent. We are going to be talking today about really dealing with loss and celebrating life. That's a reality for so many of us, particularly, all throughout life we'll deal with loss, but definitely in the past year we've seen it in just enormous magnitude. And so I think what a timely discussion, because at the end of the day, we're people before performance, and anything that we deal with, anything that we go through impacts us as women. So I'm delighted, Millicent. Thank you so much for joining me today to share.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. I mean, we met each other, a couple years ago at Money 2020 and in the Rise Up program. And I'm just so happy we've been able to stay in touch. And I love your story. And I'm just excited for us to be able to talk. I want you to do the honors though, and tell folks about yourself. Tell people watching about a bit more about you.
Sure. Well, first, let me say, Valerie, thanks for having me. I'm so lucky to have met you a couple years ago and to watch your own rising up. Since then, it's amazing. You're an inspiration for sure. And so anyway, when I had met Valera a couple years ago, had just left a little over 19-year career at Wells Fargo, which was an amazing run. I actually went there kicking and screaming, thinking I would never work for a big bank, but was taking this contract position. And 19 and a half years later, left because I wanted to spend more time with my teenage daughters, which, if any of you have teenagers, it takes a lot of time and mental effort. And I just wanted to be more there for them. I also, so while I was at Wells, I spent a lot of time as a product management leader. So product managing digital payments, helping build the Wells Fargo commercial banking portal, and launching our API gateway before I left. Since then, I've been sitting on some boards helping female-led fintech startups. And also I'm an advisor to some founders as well. So I'm enjoying the mix of my days. So that's what I do now.
I love it. I think you're doing some amazing work to help women in fintech, those female founders, get up and running. So kudos to you for helping women thrive in the entrepreneurial space. So let's talk a bit about, you've had an amazing run. You had an amazing run at Wells Fargo. Now you're, the board and advising a lot of startups. What has been that process, to get to where you are, the obstacles, the challenges? What's that been like?
Well, I have to say, when I left Wells, I was really nervous from a career perspective of, how I had just turned 50, was worried about, yes, I want to be there for my family more. But what am I going to do? I definitely don't want to be done, doing things, working, being engaged in the fintech environment. So how am I going to stay relevant? And that I kind of got in my head a little bit and was like, wow, now I don't have a full-time position with a fintech organization. Why are people going to listen to me? And so I actually, and it's funny, all of my peers and friends have always said, you're such a great networker. And I've never really believed them. In fact, I kind of didn't like networking because I just felt like partially the imposter. Like I didn't want people to really get to know me and be like, oh, she's not really what she says she is. But also it was uncomfortable for me to reach out to people and actually ask for things or ask for their help. But I have to say, I took this workshop by an organization called How Women Lead. It was based in California, but with the pandemic, it's now remote. And it's an amazing organization that really promotes women leadership.
Mhm.
And the workshop I took was a board readiness workshop because I was thinking that I wanted to pursue board positions. And it was the best thing I did, because not only did they get you really comfortable with your own specific background and really helped you highlight your accomplishments, but the network of women that I met was amazing. And then they also literally help you network and how to be comfortable and really help you realize,
Mhm.
and maybe this was also because of COVID, but help you realize when you reach out, everyone's happy to meet you and
Mhm.
engage with you. And I mean, I want to say 99% of the times that I've reached out to someone, that I, barely knew, they've been more than gracious to say, I'd be happy to meet with you. I'd be happy to, get to know you and help you with whatever your journey is. So that really gave me a boost and
Mhm.
helped me take some chances on just networking. And it's been amazing since. I don't think I've run into anyone yet that has said, you know what, I don't really want to connect with you. Luckily. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but it's been really refreshing. And it's helped with a lot of the confidence and get me get the confidence back to kind of say, it's okay that you're not at a full-time job. It's okay that you're doing a bunch of different things and you can still stay relevant.
That's a
So,
good point. And you're absolutely right to your point about imposter syndrome. Well, like I think I write quite a few articles on that topic. And, I was the speaker for an event yesterday as part of Women's History. And I shared that very thing that so many times I would think before I would send an email, before I'd reach out to someone that I thought was like more senior than me, I think, why would they want to talk to me? What do we have in
oh,
common? They're not
yeah,
interested. And so it would keep me from reaching out. But to your point, I have found more that when I've decided to just reach out anyway, I've gotten so many more doors open. And so lessons to us
mhm,
all as women, or men that might be watching, that just do it because you don't know that self perceived rejection before it even happens is just such a killer to so many
yeah.
people hours, right?
It is true.
Um,
And the way I've dealt with that rejection, the way I prepared myself to deal with that is, you know what, if they don't respond or if they reject, well, then we probably didn't have a connection and it's probably totally fine. Like,
yes, yeah.
right. So there's
Yeah,
like a positive even in the rejection.
you find it out sooner than later, right? Like I don't want to be connected to anyone that doesn't want to be connected to me. I think
That's
once
right.
you start to think about that and say, wait, because the other side of that too becomes, if I'm reaching out to someone that really doesn't want to be bothered, it's going to take more effort for me, and that doesn't feel good.
That's right.
I'm not really wanted anyway, basically. So why would I bother? So I agree with you.
Absolutely.
I totally agree with you. And I know you talk about your career, from Wales because you wanted to spend more time with your family. What led you to that decision and realize that you wanted to spend more time with your daughters and your family?
Well, a few things actually. So, several years before I left, and again, I attribute Wells Fargo to being so supportive. Our middle daughter, I had a middle, or at the time, she was our second daughter. She had been diagnosed with this really rare brain tumor at 10 weeks.
Mhm.
And, actually, can I read an excerpt from something that I'm working on?
Sure, go ahead. Go
Is
ahead.
that okay? Okay. Um, it's June 2007, and here I am in the waiting room of a NICU, which is also, for folks that don't know, newborn intensive care unit, with the lights off because it's 1 a.m. I see a sea of silhouettes of adults, presumably parents, covered with coats and blankets that are too small for them, laying in chairs that weren't made for sleeping. I didn't expect to find this room so crowded. I thought we would be the only ones that would have a child in the NICU. We finally found two chairs next to each other that we could try to sleep in for the next several hours until we would find out the next steps. As we tried to get comfortable, I couldn't believe where we were, that this was happening. I'd just taken my 10-month-old daughter to the pediatrician because I was sure she had a bug, a typical cold that would need to be treated with either antibiotics or a humidifier. I couldn't believe that my daughter of 10 months really had a brain tumor that had caused all the symptoms I had noticed over the last several weeks, but had chosen to ignore. The voluminous vomiting, the not being able to stay awake longer than 30 minutes, the crossed eyes, and the worst symptom, something in my gut telling me something was wrong. We were so used to being able to take control of situations when a problem surfaced, doing research to find solutions that would solve those problems, and then continue along our merry way. After all, we were both fairly smart and intelligent adults with graduate educations in both law and business. We had taught, or at least told ourselves, that our several years of hard work so far provided proof that we could tackle anything, both professionally and personally. But now this, could we find a treatment for her, even if she was the youngest child diagnosed with this, a condition that had only been discovered in 1978? And would she grow up to be a healthy person despite having chemo and potentially radiation given to her brain at such a young age? How were we going to beat the 5% survival rate that we were told? Were we strong enough to get through this? And what about Olivia, our 3-year-old, whose 4th birthday party was supposed to be tomorrow? So what happened after that is she ended up having her tumor removed after a 7-hour surgery, bunch of surgeries. We spent 4 or 5 months in the hospital trying experimental treatments. She ended up passing away at 10 months because, she couldn't beat the odds. And I have to say that has really changed my approach on life. My husband's too, but I'm only going to speak on behalf of mine. And what it really made me realize is a few things. Life, I know this is a cliche, but life is way too short. And all you can control is probably 5% of stuff that happens in your life. Mm-hmm. And you control that 5%. You can control how you react, how you handle things. And so when I saw that the job that I had loved doing for so long was getting evolved differently because Wells Fargo was in the media a lot for the account scandal, my job in innovation and designing payment solutions and working with customers was getting very regulatory and compliance focused, which is totally necessary, but it was getting to be like, 99% of the job. And I just was like, I'm not enjoying this. And I know that sounds selfish and I felt selfish, but at the same time, I had an older daughter who was going into high school. She started struggling with some depression and anxiety. And I thought, what am I doing? I'm not even happy at my job that I'm awake for 80% of the time. And then my daughter's at home, probably needing me. She wasn't asking me, but needing me. And so I kind of, even though in hindsight, I don't know why I thought it was a big decision, but I agonized over it for a few months. And then finally said, you know what, I just have to do this. And I think it's been great because, now both my daughters know that I'm home and they're much more happier that I'm home. But long answer to your question, that experience with our middle daughter, Lila, has really changed me and also made me view the world in such a different way. But it's given me the confidence and the empowerment to make decisions like that because you never know. And life is too short and you should spend it the exact way that you want to.
Gosh, no, first of all, it was not too long. It was not long enough. We only have a few minutes, but it speaks volumes. If you said something that was so powerful. You said, I was agonizing over this, but why was I wasn't even enjoying this. And I can only just think about how often we do things we don't even enjoy because we think we have to do that thing for whatever reason, for whatever recognition and whatever title. And we just go along with the flow, not realizing that it could all be over at some point.
Yeah,
and
totally.
To do what we absolutely love. And kudos for you for being courageous and just being, I would say be practical to say, I'm just going to do what I love to do. And I'm going to be there for my daughters. And I just commend you for that. And I think that's the reality, though, too, is that so many women, and I hope anyone that's watching this is, if we think about even right now, this She session and how many women who have made the decision, maybe even though they didn't want to right now, for a family or for other reasons to leave the workplace and might be feeling like, gosh, that was not what I wanted to do, or maybe, but I just hope that your story gives them some type of solace to say, if you did it for the right reasons, it's going to be okay. And, I would maybe, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just sharing something for those women right now, if they might be listening or watching.
Yeah. So I have kudos to my manager at the time, who was a man. Chris, no, and I hope maybe he's not on, but joined. But I'll never forget. He said, and this just shows the supportiveness of the culture at Wells Fargo. He said, "You are never going to regret taking time to spend with your family." And that literally like stayed with me. I was like, "You're right. Like, why am I even thinking about this?" But as you were saying, Valera, like when you're in it, you're like, no, I can keep doing this. Yes, it sucks, but like a guy would just suck it up and keep doing this. And another 3 to 5 years before I would get to do the job that I really enjoyed. And like I said, in hindsight, it took way too long for me to make that decision. And he's right. You will never get the time back for that you take to be with your family. I can always come back to work. The jobs are going to be there, and it definitely feels scary. But honestly, at the time, I could have even just left for a month if I decided and just come back. So it's really, I don't know why it's scarier than it is, but don't be afraid. Like really, it showed me to really trust my gut. And I don't know why I listened over the years, I've listened to my gut more and more, but I just look back and I'm like, why didn't I pay attention to my gut more when I was younger? It's very funny because it's usually right.
It usually is. And so we're trying to listen to the norm or the noise. And oftentimes it's not always what's best for us. I vividly recall too, earlier in my career, a man was saying something. It was an older or senior person and at the company. And I remember us having a conversation. He says, yeah, well, if you have kids, don't leave because that can hurt your career. And I'm thinking, okay. I'm just like, okay, all right. I think there's just so many different opinions, right? To each his own, whatever you think. But I think for the woman that makes that decision, let that be her decision, and shame her for it, make her feel like there's something wrong with her for doing that, and celebrate her choice to live in that moment with her children. That's her decision.
And even if a guy makes that decision, let them make that. It's their choice. It's a very individual choice.
Absolutely. Can you maybe share to the degree you feel comfortable about, how did you, what was the process of that loss? I mean, because you have to deal with it, right? And what became important to you to help you process it?
So it's funny. I have been beating myself up about this a little bit because right after, she was on 2 experimental treatments that there was no kind of regimen at the time because she was so young and because the disease was so new. And so we tried 2 experimental treatments. The second one almost killed her. And that's when we kind of decided, okay, like she shouldn't live the rest of her life in this hospital, trying all these crazy things. If she's really going to die, let's like bring her home and try to have a normal life as long as possible. So we did that. And what I beat myself up about is I chose somehow, and I don't remember how I thought through this, but I went back to work. And I think knowing myself at the time, I probably did it to regain some control of something in my life and to feel like I could and get satisfaction out of controlling it, and probably to regain some normalcy because, Wells Fargo, I've developed really amazing relationships with so many people, and they were that was like the constant in my life, like what regardless of where we lived or, anything like that. Like I always had this job basically amongst a group of 100 to 200 people that I knew. And so I chose to go back to work. I'm still deciding if I should regret that or not, but I went back to work while my husband was in transition anyway, between jobs. So he was taking her to some doctor's appointments and things like that. And so I think though I needed that just to kind of transition back into our normal life, whatever that was. And I also needed it to be, I think, a happy mom with my older daughter, Olivia. So maybe one way I should look at it, and again, I'm obviously still processing this, is I just did what I needed to do to get through it. And I also had to realize, and my husband and I, I think my husband would say the same thing, is you really have to realize that everyone deals with loss differently. And
Mhm.
however I deal with, I mean, like I credit him for being like, okay, you need to go back to work. Great. And not judging and not saying, are you crazy? How could you not stay home?
Right.
She's not going to be alive much longer. And so you really, it's a good lesson in empathy that you
Mhm.
really don't know what other people are going through, what their context is. And when you, um, are faced with someone that maybe, I don't know, isn't nice or isn't negative. And I think COVID has even done this even more. Like you can't judge what I shouldn't say you can't, but you shouldn't judge them just right on that 5-second interaction, right? You don't know what's going on with them. It's
Mhm.
usually not about you. I keep telling my
Mhm.
daughters this, like they're all in their head about, oh
Mhm.
my God, I'm not invited to this, or someone did this to me. And I'm like, I guarantee you that is not about you. Everyone's
Mhm.
in their head trying to deal with their own crap and
Yeah.
just they're not focused on anyone else, unfortunately. So it's been a good lesson in empathy, and I think so. I got through it by going back to work, trying to take care of myself before I took
Mhm.
care of anyone else,
Mhm.
and just recognizing that not everyone is. Yeah, everyone's different and reacts differently to things, and you just have to be patient. So I
That's a
don't.
great point though too, because oh, go ahead, finish.
No, no, no. I just wasn't sure if I answered your question.
You did. You said definitively that everyone handles or processes loss or grief differently, and to really empathize with people if it doesn't look like the way that you think it should look. And that at the end of the day, we all show up a certain way, but you don't know what people are dealing with behind the scenes. And so it becomes so much more important to really practice a bit of grace and patience with people.
Hmm.
Whether you come across them personally or professionally, you just don't know what they might be dealing with. I think
Hmm.
that's a lesson that we can all take away, even in the workplace. You just don't know what
Yeah,
people are dealing with. Be patient, be kind, because you just don't know. I mean, because I can
you
imagine
don't
you
know. Yeah,
going to work every single day, but at home you had a little bit of a daughter who was
yeah,
near a point of losing her life. So that's a lot. I mean, and then looking forward now at life, and you said it earlier, but I would love to maybe dig in it a bit more. As you said, life is short, and you look at life differently. I mean, what do you think has shifted about yourself, and what do you find yourself maybe celebrating more in life now?
I spent a lot of time before Lila was even born trying to control a lot of things. And I don't think I knew that at the time, but I would definitely do a lot of planning and a lot of like, I guess an example is like when you're about to have a kid or when you're about to go on a trip, you plan all these things and you've got your itinerary and you're
Mhm.
gonna, and you feel like if you've got all these things planned that everything's gonna go the way you think it's gonna go. And it never does. And then so before Lila, when things wouldn't go the way I thought, I would like fall apart because I'd be like, "Oh my God, I planned all this stuff and like now what?" And to my point before, like you only have control over 5% of your life. Like things are always going to go wrong and you can plan all you want and stress all you want about that stuff, but like in the end, it's going to go the way it's going to go and just kind of embrace it because when you embrace it, then you end up realizing you end up going on maybe a different adventure or you learn different things and just be open to that. So the way I've changed is now if I'm, for example, rushing to leave the house at 7:30 to take my daughter to school, and if she ends up being a few minutes late, I'm kind of like, all right, like she's still going to get to school. And guess what? If she's late, that's not really the end of the world. Now, that might be a little screwy because my tolerance of, um, or my expectation of negative is like if my kids are near fatal death, right? That's my bar now. So, unfortunately for my kids, when they're sick, I'm like, "Are you bleeding? Is this like a big deal?" And they're like, "No." Then I'm like, "You're going to be fine." Now, what I've also had to learn, again, to be empathetic to them is they're
Yeah.
allowed, even though they might think something is like this big deal because maybe they got paint on their school project. they're allowed to feel that and to make it as big a deal in their head as they want. I just know that for me, that's no longer like a big deal. And I'm not going to rush to try to help them to fix it or take care of it, because they need to build that resilience as well. But it is an interesting shift because I don't know, I just have a really low tolerance or I guess high tolerance for disaster or trauma and stuff like that. So that's really changed. And now it's to a point where my husband's like, don't you care about anything? And I'm like, no, I do. Just not as much, not all the little details like I did before. Like if I cook something and it comes out burnt, it's like, well, we still have food. We can have cereal.
There you go.
Like, right? Like,
wow. You know, that's such an amazing perspective, though, when you think about it. It sounds so simple, right? We say it and it sounds so simple.
I know. It sounds cliche. I know.
No, it doesn't sound, it doesn't sound cliche. It sounds like, why can't everybody do this? Right. And then, but I think sometimes, to your point, things happen in our lives to really, make us realize that we do need to simplify. And it sounds like, you know, I know that so many women, including myself, we like to control things. It's like, okay, did it go the way I planned it? Is everyone looking the part? Is everyone looking picture perfect? Is everything right? Is everything in place? Is this, I mean, it's like this regiment almost of perfection, or this idealized state of what life should look like and what our family should look like and what we should look like and where we should be and how we should sound, who's going to like us. And it's just so many things.
So much. Yeah.
It's a lot. It's draining. It's taxing. And it's like being on a hamster wheel. And so I think this is so relevant that we have the conversation about, man, just celebrate life. Let's just celebrate what we have, and things, like you said, are going to happen as they should. And sometimes, you know, it's unfortunate things do happen that we don't want to happen, to help us realize that. And so for any woman watching, I hope that you take this lesson as, hey, before something happens, take a moment to just celebrate what you do have and not major in the minors, as I like to call it. Like,
yes, that's great. Yes.
You know, and that's
absolutely,
I'm learning it. It's tough, right? I mean, it really is. It's, I say, hey, I'm not gonna, if that doesn't work out right, it is what it is, and we'll figure it out. But
I'm finally at the point where, honestly, and I know this is going to sound weird, where that experience with Lila, she truly gave me a gift that I feel like I'm living my life in a more peaceful or fuller way now than I was before. And I mean, I'm not going to say like you have to lose a child to get to this place, and I don't want people to do that, but that's where I feel like I am. And, you know, things like if I do feel like anything negative that happens in your life, there's always a positive. So like, you know, if I were to lose a job right now and, or whatever, things don't turn out, I'm always like, okay, well, there's got to be a good reason for that. Like for me, either I wasn't meant to do that job, or the person I would work with, maybe we wouldn't get along. Like there's always a positive. And I don't think I believed that before. I was much more of a cynic. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I love it. You're teaching me. You're speaking to me, Millicent. Trust me. I'm listening. I'm just soaking it all in. Like, this is my lessons for the rest of the day, for the year. Seriously, I mean, because when we think about it, and particularly even the women watching, we're ambitious, we're driven, we're goal-oriented. And sometimes in the chase of all those things, we can run past the very things that are important for us to be maintaining and to holding on to. And it's always a good checkpoint to have that those reminders to say, oh, hold on, slow down, make sure that you're really focusing on what's the important thing. So I really appreciate you for sharing with us today. And I wish you peace and harmony and everything. Too. And for everyone watching, you know, take Millicent's lessons, take them to heart. This is, we've come out of a very difficult year in 2020. We have an opportunity to go into the rest of 2021, moving and doing the things that we really want to do, and living life in our terms. It's owning our yes. That's exactly what we do.
Owning our yes, exactly.
We get to do it. So thank you again, Millicent. If people want to connect with you, how can they best?
Thanks for listening. Yes.
Absolutely.
Through LinkedIn, or I think I have my email also on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect.
Okay.
Would love to meet you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for watching. Everyone, please tune in next week, Thursdays, 12 to 12:30 Eastern, where we get to hear from amazing women. Next week, we will have Linda Say, who is the founder and CEO
Yay!
of the Diverse Agenda. And we're going to be having some amazing conversation as well. So make sure you tune in. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, Valeria. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining.